Einstein was a determinist. Does that mean that a murderer, a horrible mass murderer, isn't really guilty of his works because it was already preordained billions of years ago? And Einstein said, well, yeah, in some sense that's true. Even mass murderers were predetermined. Heisenberg then comes along and proposes the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and says, nonsense. There's uncertainty. You don't know where the electron is. This, of course, Einstein hated because he said God doesn't play dice with the universe. Well, hey, get used to it. Einstein was wrong. God does play dice. Every time we look at an electron, it moves. There's uncertainty with regards to the position of the electron. So what does that mean for free will? It means in some sense we do have some kind of free will. No one can determine your future events given your past history. There's always the possibility of uncertainty in whatever we do.
Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil.
Because there are lots of atheists who are, by human standards, just as good as a lot of Christians, even though they don't believe in God. It's certainly possible to be good without a belief in God. But that's not really the issue. The issue is whether goodness makes any sense if there is no God. Goodness or morality is a very particular kind of thing. And when we say that something is right or wrong, we have to ask ourselves the question whether we are talking about the thing itself, the action in this case, say rape, or are we talking about ourselves when we say that rape is wrong? If we mean that the rape itself is wrong, that means the action, or the object in this case, has the quality of wrongness. And no matter who's viewing it, whatever subject is viewing it, then it's still just as wrong. No matter what time it happens in history, no matter what culture it happens, no matter what the views of the individual doing the rape or aware of the rape happen to be, it's still wrong because the wrongness is in the rape. That's objectivism. Now, some atheists want to claim that there is objective morality in that sense, but there is no God. And the question I'm going to ask then is, how is it that there can be an objective moral wrong, which entails obligation to us to obey the principles in question, when there is no authority that undergirds it? That's the grounding question. What is it that makes rape wrong? What obligation do we have regarding that? How is that obligation adjudicated? I mean, who holds us responsible for the wrong we do if, in fact, there is no God? The simplest illustration that I can offer to get quickly to the point is, if I picked up the newspaper and I read an article in the newspaper, and somebody said, who wrote the article? And I said, well, nobody wrote the article. You would think that's strange, because articles are the kinds of things that require writers. And it wouldn't help if I responded, listen, I can read just fine. I could read better than you can read. That doesn't answer the question. Atheists say I can be good just fine without God. But that misses the point. The point is whether the concept of goodness is possible without an author to it, just like the concept of articles is possible without an author to it. Would you still be faithful to your wife if you were never married? Doesn't make any sense, because faithfulness doesn't apply. Faithfulness in marriage doesn't apply if you're not married, and never have been. By the same token, the concept of goodness doesn't apply. Moral law doesn't apply without a moral lawmaker. So an atheist can be good without a belief in God. They can deny God and still act in a way that is moral, humanly speaking. But an atheist can't be good without God, because without God as grounding, there is no good. No objective right and wrong, merely subjective feelings and opinions.
The philosopher of science, Michael Ruse, reports, the position of the modern evolutionist is that humans have an awareness of morality because such an awareness is of biological worth. Morality is a biological adaptation, no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. Richard Dawkins' assessment of human worth may be depressing, but why, on atheism, is he mistaken when he says there is at bottom no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference? We are machines for propagating DNA. It is every living object's sole reason. If there is no God, what foundation remains for objective moral duties? On the naturalistic view, human beings are just animals, and animals have no moral obligations to one another. When a lion kills a zebra, it kills the zebra, but it doesn't murder the zebra. When a great white shark forcibly copulates with a female, it forcibly copulates with her, but it doesn't rape her. For none of these actions is forbidden or obligatory. There is no moral dimension to these actions. So if God does not exist, why think we have any moral obligations to do anything? Who or what imposes these obligations upon us? Where did they come from? It's very hard to see why they would be anything more than a subjective impression ingrained into us by societal and parental conditioning. On the atheistic view, certain actions such as rape and incest may not be biologically and socially advantageous, and so in the course of human development have become taboo, that is, socially unacceptable behavior. But that does absolutely nothing to prove that such acts are really wrong. Such behavior goes on all the time in the animal kingdom. On the atheistic view, the rapist who chooses to flout the herd morality is doing nothing more serious than acting unfashionably, the moral equivalent, if you will, of Lady Gaga. If there is no moral lawgiver, then there is no objective moral law. And if there is no objective moral law, then we have no objective moral duties. Ought implies can. A person is not morally responsible for an action which he is unable to avoid. For example, if somebody shoves you into another person, you're not responsible for bumping into him. You had no choice. But Sam Harris believes that all of our actions are causally determined and that there is no free will. Dr. Harris rejects not only libertarian accounts of free will, but also compatibilistic accounts of freedom. But if there is no free will, then no one is morally responsible for anything. Moral responsibility, he says, and I quote, is a social construct, not an objective reality. I quote, in neuroscientific terms, no person is more or less responsible than any other for the actions they perform. On atheism, I don't see any reason to think we have any moral duties to do anything. Moral obligations or prohibitions arise in response to imperatives from a competent authority. If a policeman tells you to pull over, then because of his authority, who he is, you are legally obligated to pull over. But if some random stranger tells you to pull over, you're not legally obligated to do so. Now, in the absence of God, what authority is there to issue moral commands or prohibitions? There is none on atheism, and therefore there are no moral imperatives. Think of light. Light is a certain visible range of the electromagnetic spectrum, but obviously that isn't the meaning of the word light. People knew how to use the word light long before they discovered its physical nature. And I might also add, they certainly knew the difference between light and darkness long before they understood the physics of light. Now, in exactly the same way, we can know the meaning of moral terms like good and evil, right and wrong, and know the difference between good and evil without being aware that the good is grounded in God ontologically. Our moral duties are grounded by God's commandments, which are necessary reflections of his nature. I want to quote from a remarkable article that appeared in the Duke Law Journal by Arthur Allen Leff called Unspeakable Ethics, a Natural Law. Dr. Leff's difficulty is to find a foundation for moral values and duties, in this case for the law, that would be independent of human opinion, would be objective and would be in the world. And he can't find one. All I can say is this: it looks as if we are all we have. Only if ethics were something unspeakable by us, that is, something transcendent, could law be unnatural and therefore unchallengeable. As things now stand, everything is up for grabs. Nevertheless, napalming babies is bad. Starving the poor is wicked. Buying and selling each other is depraved. There is in the world such a thing as evil. Who says